Okay. You can hear me, right? Okay. You can hear me. Right? Okay, so let's get started. First of all, thank you for showing up. It's no fun talking to the walls. Students sleeping in the class are still better than walls, is what I have found over 30 years. But I do realize that you may not all of you may be able to stay the whole time. So, if you need to leave, please feel free to leave. Just try to leave from the sides if possible so that, you won't have too much disturbance. I am going to do the recording of the whole class. We're going to have that. This time, actually, we are even trying to do it more professionally. And then so that, in case people aren't able to see, if you have to leave in the middle, you'll still have the video available. So, couple of things. First of all, I already sent mails on this, so you know that these are the office hours. For the TAs, basically, I think Garrett actually said 1:30. I should write that down. In fact, I can write it down myself. So Garrett is 1:30 on Friday. I'll set it up. But everything else, every day there is at least one office hours. Today, I believe Shailik actually went there. I assume none of you showed up. So he's kept to until back. Tomorrow, Ryan. On Wednesday is Sarath. Thursday is Adam. And Friday is Garrett. And as I said, Shailik and Sarath are grad TAs. Ryan, Adam, and Garrett are the UTAs. On my office hours this week and next week, it's iffy because I'm actually only here until Wednesday early morning. In fact, basically only tomorrow. So I'm going to be available today after the class as well as tomorrow at 2 o'clock for this week. And then for next week, I will be available on Thursday at 3 p.m. because that's when I come back. Friday anyway we have a class. And then I will set up office hours regularly for the third week onwards. Okay. If you need to talk to me this week, especially before the hat drop, just send me an email or call me actually. My telephone number in the office is 9650113. So you can always call that number, and if I pick it up, that means I'm there in the office, so you can stop by or you can talk on the phone, especially before the ad drop date in case you need any questions to be answered. Okay, so that's that. As I said, the class slides being used are available here, and the playlist of the videos are available there. That was like last time's videos. And then the same thing we'll do this time too. And the links for the slides I'm using today are available here already. So you can open them, if you want, and you can follow along. Okay. So that's the deal regarding that. And then, so today I have an ambitious schedule. So we'll see how far we do. Basically, this is the agenda. We're going to do, so the tricky part, basically what's going to happen today is we'll start at intelligent agent architectures. It's a sort of an abstract discussion. Some of these might very well make a lot more sense at the end of the semester because this puts the overview framework in which the entire semester's topics are going to fall nicely. Okay, so oftentimes I find that this is the discussion that people sort of think, either some of you already thought about what should an AI's program have as its building blocks, in which case it will be fun for you. Some of you basically thought, just give me an algorithm already, why do you keep on going with various architectures, in which case you are likely to be more bored, but so actually we can spend a lot of time on this, but I'll basically spend, I'll try to get through this quickly so that you have an idea of where the different kinds of topics that we're doing in this semester going to stack up with respect to the intelligent agent architectures. So those are the subtopics there. And then the next big main topic is, we will, having done that, we talk about atomic models, and then start talking about search in atomic models. Once again, there are subtopics there. We'll get to as many of them as we can. I would be extremely surprised if I complete 2.4. I would be mildly, pretty much still very surprised if I complete 2.3. But anything, and then so that's what I'm doing there. Okay, but to give you an idea, your first project is that 2.3. First project would essentially be doing search algorithms, and the first project, part 1, is doing uninformed search, basically trying out depth first search on some problem. Okay, and then the next project, the second part of the first project would be informed search, which will have A-star search with heuristics. Okay, so that's how you get there. Okay. Okay, so we sort of saw this agent architecture last time, and then what we are basically going to say is, an agent is essentially going to take some percept sequences. It's looking at the environment, it's getting some information about the environment. These are the sensed information. You can call them percepts. And it's deciding, based on the percepts, it's trying to fit, and its top level goals that it might have, it's trying to decide what action to do next. That's at the very abstract level, that's what an agent is supposed to do. Okay, whether it is intelligent or not, as I said, is in the eye of the beholder. So an agent has to look at the environment, look at the percepts that it's getting, and again, the interesting part here is it takes the sequence of percepts. This is something that you should ask yourself: why should I consider the sequence of sensory information I got from whatever the longest time, as against just look at whatever percept I got right now? Do you understand what I'm saying? This is a temporal problem, right? I mean, because agents live for a long time. So the question is, why don't I just take the current percept and then basically make a decision just based on that? You can start thinking about that in the background. But in general, it turns out that your action, the optimal action you should do, depends not just on what the current percept is, but also what sequence of percepts occurred for whatever, certain amount of time. Okay, so that's why the agent program is it's a function of the percept sequence. Okay, it's taking the perception and perceptions the sensed information, and it's taking a function. Whatever the agent program is, it can be seen as some function of that. Okay, that's at the high level. So then, of course, all this is doing is it's updating at a very high level. And then, agent is looking at the world, getting the current percept, throwing it into the memory so that it remembers that this is what I saw at t equal to 1, t equal to 2, t equal to 3, whatever. And then it chooses a best action based on the current memory. And the memory basically has the sequence of percepts that it currently has put in there. Now, and then finally, it also remembers that it did an action right now. That's all. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now, the question, of course, is what's a rational agent? Because we talked a big, last class, if you remember, we looked at 4 different definitions of what possibly can be the high-level, high-level goal of AI, and focused mostly on acting rationally as the definition that we will look at. Although, of course, I did tell you acting like humans is not that bad, and thinking like humans also is not that bad, because they have very important applications there too. But we will look at rationality and rational performance. So, in essence, an agent essentially has some goals that have been set by somebody outside of it. It's extremely important that your performance measure is not given to yourself by yourself, because you will be able to find that you're doing extremely well all the time, because you just give yourself an A+ grade all the time. So there is an external performance measure, and with respect to which, basically it's trying to do actions that will optimize that performance measure. Okay, and the rational action is whatever is the action that maximizes the expected value of the performance measure given the percept sequence to date and the prior knowledge. Okay, so that's basically a kind of an English definition of what a rational agent is trying to do. You know, it's taking into account all the percept sequences that it got till now, and it has some knowledge about how the world works in addition to just these percepts. Okay, and with respect to all that knowledge, it's trying to figure out what is the action that will give it the highest expected utility. And it's picking that action. Remember last class we wrote this argmax of expected value of the utility of doing an action in the current state. Instead of state, there actually I should have written percept sequence. Okay. Now, of course, rationality doesn't necessarily mean omniscience. Rationality doesn't mean that you know everything about the world. It only means that you are using what you do know. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not reasonable for a rational agent. So actually, since rationality is not omniscience, you could reduce the difficulty of your life by knowing less. Are any of you surprised at this? Right? Okay. If you, remember the cat that closes its eyes and hopes the world went away because it closed its eyes and so there is no world. Okay. So you want to be able to say that that is not a rational cat. Otherwise, you too can do it. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can reduce the amount of information you are getting about the world by just deciding not to sense the world. Okay. At which point you know less about it. Then you'll say, well, I don't know anything, so pretty much any action is as good as any other action, so you shouldn't be unhappy at me. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay? So it's very important to understand that even though rationality is not omniscience, rationality does expect that you use the knowledge that you do have. Okay? And similarly, rationality doesn't mean clairvoyant. You don't necessarily have to predict future to be able to be rational. We're not talking about that. So a rational agent may oh, that's not good. Okay. We'll find out. A rational agent does not necessarily know what is going to happen in the future. It doesn't necessarily know. It basically might actually take an action which seems the right action to do based on what it knows about the world, and it might actually just get run over by a bus that it didn't see coming. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so you don't then, if somebody actually gets into an accident, you don't right away say, well, that must be irrational. You should not have been in that position. But if on the other hand, if somebody got into an accident by jumping into the middle of a busy highway, then you make fun of them. Why do you make fun of them? Because they should have known better. Are you born yesterday? Don't you know that there's traffic on the middle of a busy highway, and if you jump on it, then you'll get hit by a car. Okay? And then similarly, rationality again, as I said, doesn't mean successful. It's just you're using the knowledge you have to maximize your expected performance. And expected performance doesn't necessarily mean the best performance given by somebody who has omniscience, clairvoyance, and and a deterministic rule. Okay, that's kind of useful to know. And then again, percept sequence is essentially you're talking about taking snapshots of the world. One interesting question is here I wrote states S0, S1, etc., Sn. There is actually a distinction to be made between the world state versus percept. Percept is what I can see of the world. Okay, if I have complete observation, if I have very, very good sensors, then essentially what I see is what the world is. If my glasses are already fogging up as I'm speaking, what I see of the world is just a percept. It's not the state of the world. Do you understand what I'm saying? So anytime when I actually wrote history as the sequence of states, I'm already assuming in that case that the perception is perfect. Okay, perception can actually be imperfect, in which case you only get partial information about the state you are looking at. And that would be the more general scenario. And the performance is obviously a function of this percept sequence, and in this case I'm just saying the function of the states. And expected performance is trying to basically average out, if in particular if the world is stochastic, in the sense it will behave differently every time you actually do actions in it, which we'll again come back to in a minute. There are many worlds where the same exact action gives a slightly different effect every time you do it. Okay, that's the way our worlds are. And so if you have stochastic worlds, then essentially you cannot just say, well, I basically did this action once and I got into a big failure, so it means it's the wrong action. Maybe that was just at particular time you had the worst possible outcomes of an action that you did. And if you redo it again, maybe you'll get it better. Okay, so that's why you take expectation. Okay, so when you're talking about an agent and its environment, you typically talk about percepts, actions, goals, and the environment. Percepts is what are you getting as inputs by looking at the world. When I say word looking, I mean looking, hearing, touching, any type of sensing of the world. I just use the word looking. Actions is whatever I can do to manipulate the environment that I'm in. Okay? This is my free will. The actions I do is the way I'm changing the world. Goals, what is it that I'm trying to optimize? It could be this performance metric we're talking about. And then environment itself is this thing that includes me, but it's also outside of me. And it turns out that actually environments can be very different in terms of their properties, and we'll spend a little more time on that in 1.2, environment types. Okay? So just to get an idea, this is just a way of thinking of the pieces that are there in an agent architecture. So if you have percepts, if you have like an automated taxi agent, its percepts would be things like the video, the accelerometers, the gauges, the engine sensors, the keyboard, etc. Those are all its things from which it's getting its percepts. Okay. Actions, you can do steering, you can do accelerating, you can do braking, you can do honking, you can do speak and display is of course the fingers. Okay, so those are all the things that the automated agent and taxi agent can do to affect its environment. Okay, goals: reach the destination, maximize profits, and then, so these are the typically the normal goals that you think of. If you are trying to go somewhere, you're trying to decide where am I going. Okay, the destination. And if you are a taxi agent, then you are also trying to get there fast so that you can then pick up some other fare. Okay, but then there are also background goals, the safety and the fact that you have to obey laws, otherwise you will wind up getting tickets, the driving tickets, and things like passenger comfort. Even if you think you're going safe, because you know how to drive at 175 miles per hour on the highway, but your passengers are puking in the back seat, probably they're not going to give you a good deal at the end. So that will kind of wind up affecting the profit making goal. Okay? But the interesting thing is some of these goals, even as you see here, some of these goals are already mutually conflicting. Can be conflicting, right? And that's where life is. Otherwise, it would be much simpler to actually decide what's the optimal action to do. Oftentimes, the optimal action is probably making a trade-off between all these competing pressures, right? Okay? And then comes to environment. In the case of environment, of course, for the taxi agent, it's like things like the streets, the freeways, the traffic, the pedestrians, the weather, the customers, and so on. In fact, I think there was a discussion that we had last class about when automated drivers, when will autonomous cars start, getting onto the roads, and whether or not it's going to be a big issue. In some sense, if all cars are autonomous, things are actually easy. this was something that I sent after the class. In some sense, you already are not allowing people to drive on freeways with their golf carts. What's wrong with golf carts? Golf carts are also motorized, sort of. I mean, they have electric motors. But we say, no, you don't get to come onto the freeways because we require certain minimum speed and, to be on the freeway. Okay, and so at some point of time, they might also say, you don't get to come onto the freeway because you have a human brain, and the human brain is fallible. And so we'll only allow autonomous cars to do their thing on the freeways. At which point, we'll basically, the freeways might be fully accident-free, and then they'll all get stuck when they come out of the exit. Okay, so that could be a possible thing, in which case the environment can actually become a simpler environment. As I mentioned, the problem with the urban streets is what's happening in the heads of the other people who are driving around. Okay, and if they are distracted, if you see them talking on the cell phone, then you get away from the highway as soon as possible, because they are likely to fall into an accident very soon, and you don't want to be the person they're flashing. Okay, so that's to kind of, if you think of any intelligent agent, you can think of what is its percepts, actions, goals, and environment. Because that's sort of a thing to do. So I won't go into this, but in the back of your head, you can think of if it's an internet shopping agent. If you have an agent, it just does shopping for you. And what would be, it's not, so the action doesn't necessarily mean a physical action. It can be a cyber action. Okay, so for example, for the internet shopping agents, the percepts might be, does anybody by any chance have a Surface, Microsoft Surface? Okay, that's fine, I can always shift over to this. Because I just think you have not gotten it. We'll go as far as it goes, and then I'll change over to the other machine. So basically for percepts would be partial contents of the various internet sources that you are handling, that you're getting by doing get and post, etc. actions. The actions can be things like, posting information, buying, using your credit cards and so on. The goals can be like if you are a shopping agent, cheapest price on specific goods. Environment is internet, congestion, traffic, multiple sources and so on. Okay, so this is just a general idea of how to think of any intelligent agent. That's all I'm trying to say. So the actions can be dependent on the particular environment that agent is living in. Okay. Now, one interesting question is, how do these percepts, actions, goals, and environment, how do these, remember, these are the properties of the problem that the agent is facing. And what is the solution that agent is trying to compute? It's always the same. What's the next action I should do? Right? Every agent tries to decide what is the next action I should do, and it wants to decide that in trying to optimize, in essence, the performance metric in the context of all the knowledge it has. So it's interesting to ask yourself, how do each of these pieces make that problem, just that algorithm complexity, harder versus easy? Do you understand what I'm saying? These are two different issues. One is, this is how the problem is. But if you can wish for a different problem setup for you, so that your life would be easy, life being the computation of the optimal action would be easy, what would you do to wish? That's a good thing to think about, okay? In terms of percepts, what do? Obviously, if you have perfect perception about the world, it makes problems easier. If you have partial perception about the world, it makes problems harder. If you have no perception about the world, it makes problem what? Unsolvable. Which means it is easy for you. You understand what I'm saying? If basically you want to make your life easy, go home and poke your eyes. Right? Then you can't see anything, and nobody can say, are you blind? You say, yes, I made myself one. Okay, now I cannot see anything, I don't know anything about the world, so I'm rational. With respect to what I'm not getting, I'm doing the optimal I can. Nobody can, bring a lawsuit against you. what do lawsuits do? Okay, nobody ever says, this guy did not anticipate that I will be on this road at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm going to sue him. No, you're not going to say that. You'll only say, this guy did not use his available eyesight and available sensors to make the right decision. He made the wrong decision and he hit me. So I'm going to sue him. If, on the other hand, I don't have eyes and my car doesn't have tires, then lots and lots of things become easy. Okay, now of course, what became easy is not your performance metric. Your life became easy, in the sense, you don't have to say, oh my God, my brain is hurting because I have to think so much about what to do next. There's nothing to think. But on the other hand, you're not having a great life unless you have billionaire parents or something, because your performance metric sucks. You have to differentiate this. Okay? Then lack of actions, again, makes performance harder. Okay? But on the other hand, again, there is this possibility that if I have no action, then I say, I'm just an observer. What can I do? Right? I mean, if you ask your friend to tie you up so that you can't do anything, then you can't be held responsible for whatever happened around you. Okay? So it's useful to keep in mind. Obviously, the more natural thing is, if you have actions, you actually have the ability to increase your performance metric. Okay? But if you don't have actions, you can actually, but in trying to increase your performance metric, you may actually have to think more. One very interesting question that comes up in intelligent agency is, deliberation scheduling. How many of you have dealt with this problem? None of you, right? Your entire life you've been dealing with it. You've been given an exam which is exactly 1 hour long. You're trying to think of what is the best way to answer the question as well as complete answering the question in 1 hour. How much time to think and how much time to write? What's the most optimal policy? In fact, you would not mind. So in fact, in the exam scenario, are you supposed to just start writing the moment people say, every time I plead with students when I give the exams, please read the entire exam once before starting to answer the questions, because I don't put the easiest question at the beginning, not necessarily. It may be the easiest question for you might be the 14th question. And whereas the hardest question for you might be the first question. I say this, but do people listen to me? No. As soon as you say start, it's as if somebody is running behind you, asking you to write. Is that the optimal policy necessarily? So, back, and this won't go off. Okay, so now I just choose this. Yeah, so we are talking about deliberation scheduling, and I was trying to argue that you have always had to do this. And it's one of the hardest problems. It's one of the hardest problems. Nobody actually knows how much time to think before trying to answer the question. Okay? And so when I give you more actions, more perceptual knowledge, etc., then your life can actually become harder because you have more things to think about. For the kids who came to the exam not knowing that there was going to be an exam on that day, deliberation scheduling will take epsilon time. Right? Yeah, I don't know anything, might as well just start writing something. Because there's no question of thinking, right? Because I haven't studied, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay? But on the other hand, if you have actually prepared and if you have percept, if you have background knowledge, then you have the question of how much time to think versus how much time to execute. And that's one of the things I'm saying in terms of the fact that actually, you know, the computation time can actually become, computational difficulty can become higher when you are trying to improve your performance metric by having more percepts and more actions. Okay? Complex goals make performance harder. If you have competing goals, if you have mutually conflicting goals, then it becomes harder to decide how do I optimize the performance. Right? And finally, basically, the environment is the thing that is actually, so in terms of percepts, actions, and goals, one of the questions is, in terms of, you may say that perception and action is a function of myself, but it's also really is a function of the environment. I might have the very best glasses, eyeglasses that I can buy from Costco, but I still don't know what's going on in your head. That's because you made it inaccessible to you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so we will talk now next about the environment types. And so the thing is, this is what we were talking about last time. From the environment's point of view, whether or not you will be able to sense its state. Okay, that is perception. It may be perfect. That means the environment actually allows you to be able to get its complete state, if only you have the right sensors. Versus imperfect, that means it doesn't allow you to get the full state. Okay? Then the environment might be static versus dynamic. Static versus dynamic essentially is when you are thinking, remember you will be thinking to decide what to do next. When you are thinking, what if the environment changes? Okay? Think of the chess game that you are playing with a grandmaster, where you are given up to 3 hours, I guess, for the whole game, and so you have